Commander Vex 9 strutted through the detention block with all the confidence of someone who had never met a human before. His 4 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he approached cell block Zeta, where the latest prisoner sat waiting. The Galactic Council had finally captured one of those infamous humans, and frankly, Vex was beginning to wonder what all the fuss was about. "So this is the legendary human terror," he muttered to his second-in-command, Lieutenant Grix. The purple-skinned officer nodded nervously, his tentacles twitching with barely concealed anxiety. "Sir, perhaps we should review the containment protocols one more time," Grix suggested, his voice carrying that particular tone reserved for moments when someone was about to make a catastrophically stupid decision. Vex waved him off with one of his 6 arms. "Nonsense. We have her locked in a level 9 gravity cell. That's enough force to crush a Centaurian battle tank into a pancake. What could one small human possibly do? Oh, if only he knew." The human in question was Captain Maya Torres, though the aliens had no idea they were dealing with someone who had spent the last 5 years developing unconventional warfare tactics for the Human Defense Corps. She sat cross-legged in the center of the gravity cell, appearing completely relaxed despite the crushing force pressing down on her from all directions. The aliens had set the gravity to 15 times standard, which should have rendered her unconscious within minutes. Instead, Maya was doing breathing exercises. "Fascinating specimen," observed Dr. Klepp, the station's chief xenobiologist, as he studied the readouts from his monitoring equipment. Her vital signs remained surprisingly stable, and most species would have been reduced to organic paste by now. Vex preened at the compliment to his security measures. "The gravity field is perfectly calibrated. She cannot move, cannot escape, cannot even think properly under that kind of pressure. We have all the time in the world to extract information about human military capabilities." Maya opened one eye and looked directly at the observation window. Even through the reinforced transparent aluminum, her gaze made several of the watching aliens take an involuntary step backward. Then she smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Did she just look at us?" whispered Technician Borg, his insectoid features quivering with unease. "Impossible," Vex declared, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. "The neural compression effects alone should prevent coherent thought at this gravity level." Maya's smile widened. She raised one hand, very slowly, and gave them a cheerful little wave. The control room fell silent except for the hum of the gravity generators and the sound of Dr. Klepp's equipment frantically recalibrating itself. "Sir," Grix said carefully, "perhaps we should consider increasing the gravity field to maximum intensity." "Already done," squeaked the technician operating the gravity controls. "They were at maximum output. The generators are running at 120% capacity." In the cell, Maya had somehow managed to stand up. She dusted herself off with casual indifference, as if she were dealing with nothing more bothersome than a light breeze. The gravity field that should have been crushing her into the floor was having about as much effect as a stern talking to. "This is impossible," Dr. Klepp breathed, his 3 heads shaking in unison. "No biological organism can withstand that level of gravitational force." Maya began to pace around the cell, examining the walls with the focused attention of someone conducting a professional inspection. She tapped various surfaces, nodded to herself, and occasionally paused to make little humming sounds that somehow managed to sound distinctly ominous. "What is she doing?" Vex demanded, his earlier confidence evaporating faster than water on a heated plasma coil. "It appears she is studying the containment field geometry," Dr. Klepp replied, his multiple eyes fixed on the scanning displays. "But that is ridiculous. Even if she could somehow resist the gravity, she lacks the technical knowledge to understand our technology." Maya stopped pacing and looked up at the observation window again. This time she held up one finger, as if asking for patience. Then she pointed to her wrist where a chronometer would be if she had been wearing one. The message was clear: "Give me a minute." "Sir, I really think we should sound the alert," Grix said, his tentacles now writhing with full-blown panic. "Alert for what?" Vex snapped, though he was beginning to feel a growing sense of unease. She is contained in an escape-proof cell under crushing gravitational force. What could she possibly? Maya had crouched down near one of the gravity field emitters built into the floor. She placed her hands flat against the surface and closed her eyes, as if listening to something only she could hear. The gravity field fluctuated. Just for a moment, but every alarm in the control room immediately began shrieking warnings about power fluctuations in the containment system. "Impossible," Vex whispered. Maya opened her eyes and grinned up at them. Then she pressed her hands more firmly against the floor and began to move them in a slow, circular pattern. The gravity field fluctuated again, more strongly this time. "She is somehow interfering with the field generators," Dr. Klepp announced, his voice climbing several octaves in alarm. "But the technology required to do such a thing is far beyond human capabilities." "Clearly not," Grix observed dryly. Maya stood up and brushed her hands together with the satisfied air of someone who had just figured out how to hot wire a particularly stubborn piece of machinery. She looked up at the observation window and held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes. "Sound the station-wide alert," Vex ordered, his earlier swagger completely gone. "All security teams to containment level." "Sir, what should I tell them they are responding to?" asked the communications officer. Vex stared down at the human, who was now examining the wall-mounted gravity emitters with the focused intensity of a master craftsman studying a particularly interesting piece of equipment. "Tell them we have a containment breach in progress," he said slowly, "and tell them to bring everything we have." Maya had found what she was looking for. The gravity field in the cell was generated by a series of emitters built into the walls, floor and ceiling, all working in perfect harmony to create an inescapable crushing force. But like any complex system, it had weaknesses. She had spent her career studying alien technology, and she recognized the telltale energy signatures of Krillian gravity manipulation devices. More importantly, she knew their one critical flaw: they required perfect synchronization to maintain field stability. Disrupt that synchronization, and the whole system would begin to resonate. Maya placed her hands against the wall emitter and began to tap out a very specific rhythm. The gravity field responded by shifting minute, creating tiny variations in the crushing force. In the control room, alarms were now screaming constantly as the containment system registered increasingly erratic power fluctuations. "She is creating harmonic resonance in the field generators," Dr. Klepp announced, his scientific fascination temporarily overriding his terror. "But the calculations required to achieve such precise interference are staggeringly complex." "How long before containment failure?" Vex demanded. "At current interference levels, approximately," Dr. Klepp consulted his instruments. 30 seconds. Maya looked up at them and held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes total. She had promised them 3 minutes, and she was going to deliver exactly that. The security teams were charging through the corridors toward the detention block, but they would never make it in time. Maya had deliberately chosen the most structurally vulnerable point in the gravity field matrix, and her interference was creating a cascade failure that would soon render the entire system inoperable. The gravity field began to pulse visibly, waves of distortion rippling through the air like heat shimmer. "Containment breach imminent," announced the station computer in its maddeningly calm voice. "All personnel should evacuate the affected area immediately." "Evacuate?" Vex sputtered. "We cannot evacuate. This is a maximum security facility." Maya stepped back from the wall and assumed a ready stance, her body coiled like a spring waiting to be released. The gravity field was now fluctuating wildly, switching between crushing force and near weightlessness in rapid cycles. She held up 1 finger. 10 seconds. "Sir, we need to leave now," Grix urged, already backing toward the exit. The gravity field collapsed. For a moment, Maya hung suspended in zero gravity as the containment system completely failed. Then the backup systems kicked in, restoring normal gravity throughout the detention block. Maya landed lightly on her feet and stretched, working out the kinks from sitting in crushing gravitational force. Then she walked over to the cell door and examined the locking mechanism. It was a standard Galactic Council security lock, designed to be absolutely impregnable. Unfortunately for the aliens, Maya had been studying their security systems for years, and she knew that every lock had a manual override hidden somewhere in the mechanism. She found it in less than 30 seconds. The cell door slid open with a cheerful chime. Maya stepped out into the corridor and looked around, taking in the flashing emergency lights and the distant sound of approaching security forces. She had maybe 2 minutes before they arrived in force, which was more than enough time for what she had in mind. She headed for the nearest equipment locker. The approaching security team consisted of 12 heavily armed Galactic peacekeepers, each one trained in subduing dangerous prisoners and equipped with enough firepower to level a small building. They moved through the corridors with military precision, their weapons raised and ready. "Target is confirmed escaped from containment," reported team leader Corks through his communicator. Moving to intercept and recapture. "Be careful," came Vex's voice through the comm system. "This human appears to be far more dangerous than we initially assessed." Corks's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Sir, with respect, she is one small organic being without weapons or armor. We are 12 trained soldiers with military-grade energy weapons. I think we can handle one escaped prisoner." They rounded the corner into the main detention corridor and stopped dead. Maya was waiting for them. She had appropriated a maintenance uniform from the equipment locker and was now dressed in the standard-issue grey coveralls of a station technician. In her hands she held what appeared to be some sort of improvised device constructed from parts scavenged from the equipment locker. "Hello, boys," she said cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind if I borrow a few things." Corks raised his weapon. "Surrender immediately, human, or we will be forced to use lethal force." Maya tilted her head thoughtfully. "You know, that is an interesting threat. But before you do anything hasty, you might want to take a look at what I have been building here." She held up her improvised device, which looked like a random collection of wires, power cells, and gravity field components held together with maintenance tape. "This," she announced with obvious pride, "is what happens when you give a human engineer access to your equipment locker and 3 minutes of free time." Cork studied the device with growing unease. It looked completely harmless, like the sort of thing a desperate prisoner might cobble together from spare parts. But there was something about the human's confident smile that made his combat instinct scream warnings. "What does it do?" he asked, against his better judgment. Maya's grin widened. "Well, I am so glad you asked. You see, I took the gravity field emitters from your containment system and combined them with the power cells from your emergency lighting. Then I added a few components from your atmospheric recycling system and created what I like to call a portable gravity bomb." The security team exchanged nervous glances. "That is impossible," Corks declared, though his voice carried considerably less conviction than before. Gravity manipulation technology requires massive power sources and sophisticated control systems. "You would think so, wouldn't you?" Maya agreed pleasantly. "But it turns out that your equipment is beautifully modular. All I had to do was bypass a few safety protocols and reconfigure the power coupling matrix. Elementary engineering, really." She casually pressed a button on the side of the device. Every piece of loose equipment in the corridor suddenly slammed against the nearest wall with tremendous force. The security team's weapons were torn from their hands and sent flying. 2 of the soldiers were knocked off their feet as their own armor became too heavy to support. Maya released the button and everything returned to normal. "The beauty of a gravity weapon," she explained conversationally, "is that it works on everything. Weapons, armor, internal organs, structural supports. Very versatile." The security team stared at her in shock. "Now then," Maya continued, "I believe we need to have a little chat about prisoner treatment protocols." And that was when Commander Vex realized that capturing a human had been the worst mistake of his career. Commander Vex stared at the security feeds in horrified fascination as his supposedly elite peacekeepers stood frozen in the corridor, facing down one small human with a homemade gravity device. This was not how his day was supposed to go. "Sir," Lieutenant Grix whispered, his tentacles now tied in what could only be described as anxiety knots, "perhaps we should consider negotiating with the prisoner." "Negotiate?" Vex's 4 eyes bulged in outrage. "With a human? Do you have any idea what the Galactic Council would do to us if they found out we negotiated with a terrorist?" "Better than explaining how we lost an entire space station to one unarmed prisoner," Grix muttered under his breath. Maya, meanwhile, was enjoying herself immensely. She had spent the last 2 years in various alien detention facilities, and this was the first time anyone had been foolish enough to give her access to gravity manipulation technology. It was like Christmas morning for someone with her particular skill set. "Now, gentlemen," she addressed the stunned security team, "I think we need to establish some ground rules. First, no more shooting at me. It makes me cranky, and when I get cranky, I tend to get creative with other people's technology." Team leader Corks was desperately trying to think of a way to salvage the situation. His training had covered hostage scenarios, armed insurgents, and even rampaging space monsters, but nobody had ever prepared him for dealing with a human who could apparently rebuild alien technology while making casual conversation. "What do you want?" he asked, deciding that cooperation might be the better part of valor. Maya pretended to consider the question. "Well, for starters, I would like my personal effects back. Then I would like safe passage to the nearest human-controlled system. And finally," her expression hardened, "I would like to know why the Galactic Council thought it was acceptable to kidnap a human diplomat." The security team exchanged confused glances. Diplomat. Their briefing had definitely not mentioned anything about a diplomat. In the command center, Dr. Klepp was frantically reviewing the prisoner files. "Sir, according to our intelligence reports, the human was captured during a raid on a suspected weapons facility." Because it was a weapons facility, Maya called out cheerfully, apparently having excellent hearing. "Specifically, it was a diplomatic research station where I was working on defensive applications for human colonies. You know, the kind of research that is perfectly legal under about 15 different interstellar treaties." Vex felt a cold sensation spreading through his digestive tract. "Check the documentation again," he ordered Klepp. "Also," Maya continued, "you might want to review the sensor logs from my capture. I am willing to bet you will find that I was not carrying any weapons, was not threatening anyone, and was in fact in the middle of a video call with the human colonial administration when your goons kicked down my door." Dr. Klepp's multiple faces had gone pale. "Sir, I am finding several discrepancies in our intelligence reports. It appears the facility was indeed registered as a diplomatic research station with the Interstellar Commerce Bureau." And Maya added with obvious satisfaction, "I am willing to bet that nobody bothered to check whether I had diplomatic immunity before they decided to stuff me in a gravity crusher." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that typically preceded career-ending disciplinary actions and massive diplomatic incidents. Vex closed his eyes and tried to calculate how much trouble he was in. The mathematics were not encouraging. "Sir," Grix whispered, "we need to contact the Galactic Council immediately and report this situation." "Report what exactly?" Vex hissed back. "That we illegally detained a human diplomat, threw her in a torture device, and then watched her escape and build weapons from our own equipment." Maya had been listening to this exchange with growing amusement. "Oh, this gets better and better. Let me guess, nobody told you that humans have observer status with the Galactic Council now, did they?" More silence. This time it was the kind of silence that preceded interstellar wars. "Observer status was granted 3 months ago," Maya explained helpfully. "Right after we helped the Centaurian Republic deal with that nasty pirate problem near the Vega system. Funny how shooting down a few dozen pirate ships can improve diplomatic relations." Dr. Klepp was now frantically accessing the Galactic Council database. Sir, she is correct. Humans were granted observer status on Stardate 4847.2. Any hostile action against human citizens now constitutes an act of aggression against a council-recognized species. Vex sat down heavily in his command chair. In the space of 10 minutes, he had managed to create a diplomatic incident that could potentially destabilize half the galaxy. Maya, on the other hand, was just getting started. Now, about that safe passage I mentioned, she said, hefting her improvised gravity weapon. I am going to need a ship, supplies, and a formal apology from whoever authorized my capture. We cannot just give you a ship, Corks protested weakly. Maya raised an eyebrow. You cannot? That is interesting because I was under the impression that unlawful detention of a diplomatic representative typically requires significant compensation under interstellar law. She paused thoughtfully. Of course, if you prefer, we could do this the hard way. I could use this little device I built to tear your station apart piece by piece until someone with actual authority shows up to negotiate. To demonstrate her point, she activated the gravity weapon again. This time she focused the field on a section of the corridor wall. The reinforced titanium steel composite crumpled like paper, leaving a perfectly spherical indentation about 2 meters deep. The nice thing about gravity, Maya observed casually, is that it works on everything equally. Walls, floors, life support systems, reactor shielding. Very democratic that way. The implications were not lost on anyone present. A station-wide structural failure would kill everyone aboard, regardless of species or rank. Vex activated his communicator with trembling hands. This is Commander Vex to all department heads. Report to the command center immediately for emergency consultation. Within minutes, the command center was packed with nervous alien officials, all trying to process the fact that their supposedly impregnable detention facility had been compromised by a single human with access to spare parts. Chief Engineer Throke was the first to speak. Commander, if the human continues to destabilize our structural integrity, we will face cascade failure within 30 minutes. The station cannot withstand that kind of gravitational stress. How did she even know how to build such a device? Demanded Security Chief Yala. Our gravity technology is classified at the highest levels. Maya's voice came through the comm system, having apparently figured out how to tap into their communications network. Well, that is a funny story. You see, when you lock someone in a gravity cell for several hours, they have plenty of time to study how the system works. And when that someone happens to be a specialist in alien technology adaptation, they can learn quite a lot. Adaptation. Dr. Klepp squeaked. Oh yes, Maya replied cheerfully. That is what I do for a living. I take alien technology and figure out how humans can use it better. It is a very rewarding career, especially when people are foolish enough to give me hands-on experience with their equipment. Station Administrator Zelk stepped forward, his official robes rustling with barely controlled panic. What exactly do you want for your cooperation in resolving this situation peacefully? I thought I made that clear, Maya said. I want my personal effects, safe passage home, and a formal apology. Oh, and I want the names of whoever authorized my illegal detention. We cannot reveal classified operational information, Vex protested. There was a pause, followed by the sound of Maya activating her gravity weapon again. This time, every light fixture in the command center began to rattle ominously. Let me rephrase that, Maya said pleasantly. I want the names of whoever authorized my illegal detention, or I start taking apart your power grid one section at a time. The rattling stopped, but the message was clear. Administrator Zelk looked around the room at his terrified staff and made the kind of executive decision that would either save their careers or end them completely. Very well, he announced. We agree to your terms. Excellent. Maya sounded genuinely pleased. I will be waiting in Shuttle Bay 3. Please have my belongings delivered there, along with a fully fueled long-range scout ship and a written apology from whoever is in charge of this facility. And if we comply with these demands, Zelk asked carefully, then I leave quietly, and we all pretend this never happened. I get to go home, you get to keep your space station in one piece, and nobody has to explain to the Galactic Council why they started a war with humanity over a paperwork error. It was, everyone had to admit, a remarkably reasonable offer considering the circumstances. 2 hours later, Maya stood in Shuttle Bay 3, examining her new ship with professional appreciation. It was a Krillian long-range scout vessel, equipped with quantum engines and enough supplies to reach human space without stopping. Commander Vex approached her carefully, carrying a data pad containing the formal apology and the personnel files she had requested. "I trust everything is satisfactory?" he asked, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. Maya accepted the data pad and skimmed through the contents. "Very thorough. I particularly like the part where you acknowledge that the entire incident was the result of faulty intelligence and inadequate command oversight." Vex winced. That particular phrase was going to follow him for the rest of his career. "There is one more thing," Maya said, reaching into her bag and pulling out the improvised gravity weapon. "I thought you might want this back." She handed the device to a very surprised Dr. Klepp, who accepted it with trembling hands. "How did you," he began, "build a functional gravity manipulation device from spare parts in under 10 minutes? Maya finished. "Practice. Lots and lots of practice." She climbed into the ship and settled into the pilot's seat. "Oh, and one more thing," she called out through the open hatch. "You might want to review your security protocols. If one human can do this much damage with a maintenance kit and 3 minutes of free time, you really do not want to see what happens when we show up prepared." The ship's engines hummed to life, and Maya guided the vessel out of the shuttle bay with practiced ease. Behind her, the alien crew of the detention station watched in stunned silence as their former prisoner disappeared into hyperspace, leaving them to contemplate the uncomfortable realization that humanity might be far more dangerous than anyone had previously imagined. Commander Vex stood at the observation window long after the ship had vanished, wondering how he was going to explain this incident in his official report. Lieutenant Grix joined him at the window. "Sir, what do we tell the Galactic Council?" Vex sighed deeply. "The truth, I suppose. That we captured a human diplomat by mistake, locked her in our most secure cell, and watched her turn our own technology against us in less time than it takes to file a proper incident report. Do you think they will believe us?" Vex looked at the crumpled section of corridor wall where Maya had demonstrated her improvised weapon, then at the gravity device she had built from spare parts, then at the formal apology he had been forced to sign admitting to multiple violations of interstellar law. "Honestly, Grix, I am not sure I believe it myself." And somewhere in hyperspace, Captain Maya Torres was composing her own report for the Human Colonial Administration, making sure to include detailed technical specifications for the gravity weapon she had built. After all, she thought with a smile, there was no point in wasting a perfectly good learning experience.